Right, let's get some analysis now from Professor Daryl Glaser from Wits University. Prof, thank you so much for your time on ENCA this afternoon. Let me first get your reflections on the lead up to this major political moment today. Having watched the campaigns of both the presidential candidates and the presidential debates, what's been your assessment? Did they do enough to convince Americans?
Well, you know, a large proportion of the electorate is tribally committed to either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. They didn't need convincing and weren't going to be convinced. So the fight is really over those who are convincible, as it were, a portion of the electorate in a certain number of swing states. Remember, America's got a very weird electoral system from the point of view of most countries in the world, first developed in the 18th century and then modified in various ways since. But you've really got 50+1 elections going on, if you include the District of Columbia. And most of them are non-competitive. It's predictable which way they're going to go. There are perhaps 10 states where it could go either way. And those are the states that where the candidates are most intensely visiting, where they're spending most of their money. And you'll find and of course, don't forget, a lot of people have already voted. So what you really are aiming at is a portion of undecided voters in swing states who haven't already voted. I suppose those are the sort of people right up until the last moment you're going to carry on trying to convince.
And we are told that over 100 million people have already voted in early voting. That's over 70% of all the 2016 ballots. What message do you think this is sending out?
I mean, some of the early votings related to the COVID epidemic and the greater use of mail-in voting and early voting and so on. But I think what this is really testifying to, more importantly, is the intense passion around this election. So, I mean, you asked the question earlier about whether this is a celebration of American democracy or not. And around most people, there's a sense of foreboding. But I'd say if there's an upside, it's that there seems to be an enormous amount of voter enthusiasm. And it does look as though this could be the highest American electoral turnout in more than a century. So at least political participation and active citizenship is still there. Perhaps the problem is rather not the absence of passion, but that sometimes the passions get too high, and sometimes the passions are informed by the enormous amount of misinformation that circulates on social media.
Yeah. There have been some concerns of possible violence post-election day. Donald Trump has already started questioning the legitimacy of the elections, has even indicated the announcement of the results must be made tonight, even though there is no requirement to do so. What are the consequences of these elections post this important day?
Look, a lot's going to depend on how decisive the result is. If there's a decisive result tonight, then I think that even Donald Trump is going to be forced to yield fairly quickly. If there's a murky result, a close result, then, as it were, the teams of lawyers are going to be following the crowds of voters, and they're going to be arguing and litigating this for a while to come. Some people may be old enough to have memories of the 2000 election between Al Gore and George W. Bush, where the Florida vote was so heavily contested and so controversial. We could potentially land up in a situation like that, or even worse, given the number of swing states. And of course, the problem is compounded by the fact that Donald Trump has made it clear from day one. In fact, he made it clear even after the 2016 election that he won, that basically he would not recognize any election loss. So there he won the Electoral College vote, but insisted that the popular vote, which he lost, was he lost only due to fraud. So he's already got record of claiming that elections that don't go his way are fraudulent. And I can't see him backing down. His tendency is to double down and triple down. So I think if the vote is close, he's going to cause trouble.
What must we watch out for as South Africa, and I suppose the African continent? The continent didn't really feature much during Donald Trump's presidency, but he has been lending some support during the COVID-19 pandemic. What outcome of the election will actually be good for us as the African continent?
It's difficult to predict because, with Donald Trump and his America Firstism, to be honest, he is totally uninterested in the African continent, and he's totally uninterested in most of the world. In the case of a few countries, there's certain actions he can take that please his base, but most of his base are not interested in at least sub-Saharan Africa. So if there's any upside to that, is that he also wasn't interested or isn't interested in initiating wars to export democracy or to support popular uprisings. And a lot of those American military interventions go wrong. So perhaps Africa can draw a sigh of relief that Donald Trump hasn't launched any of those sorts of interventions, whereas I suppose Joe Biden represents a more conventional American liberal internationalism. So he takes a greater interest in global democracy and human rights, at least rhetorically. There's always a great deal of selectiveness and hypocrisy surrounding the way Americans pursue those values. But certainly there will be a greater interest in Africa and a greater empathy for Africans coming from a Biden presidency.
Professor Daryl Glaser, thank you so much for making time on ENCA this afternoon.